Good morning and welcome to today's New York City Council hearing for the Committee on Aging. At this time, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Once again, please silence all cell phones and electronic devices. If you have testimony you wish to submit for the record, you may do so via email at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. At any time throughout the hearing, please do not approach the dais. We thank you for your kind cooperation. Chair, we are ready to begin.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Councilmember Crystal Hudson, Chair of the Committee on Aging. My pronouns are she, her. Welcome to today's oversight hearing on protecting, preserving, and supporting naturally occurring retirement communities in New York City. We will also hear resolution number 232, sponsored by Councilmember Gail Brewer, calling on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign S 2960 A 5741 to provide for an annual adjustment of the maximum income threshold eligibility for the Senior Citizen Rent Increase Exemption, or SCRE, Disability Rent Increase Exemption, DRE, Senior Citizen Homeowners Exemption, SHAHI, and Disabled Homeowners Exemption, DHE, by any increase in the Consumer Price Index. We are joined this morning by Council members Brewer, Zhuang, Lee, and Salam. A naturally occurring retirement community, or a NORC, is a community with a concentrated population of older adults. Unlike retirement communities or facilities specifically built for older adults, NORCs evolve over time, such as through the aging in place of existing residents. There are two NORC models found in NYC: housing-based NORCs and neighborhood NORCs. Housing-based NORCs are in a single age-integrated apartment building, a housing complex with multiple buildings under common management, or an area where several apartment buildings are clustered together. A neighborhood-based NORC, or NNORC, typically refers to one and two family homes found in an age-integrated neighborhood. NORC supportive service programs administered by nonprofit providers are placed within a designated NORC to address the health and social service needs of older adult residents. Such services may include assessment and case management, healthcare and wellness, housekeeping, social services, and educational activities. In NYC, both NYC Aging and the New York State Office for the Aging contract with NORCs and NNORCs across the city to provide crucial funding for these NORC programs. Decades of research have shown that NORCs provide a proven community-based alternative that allows older adults to stay safe and healthy in their homes for longer. In many cases, NORC programs help older people avoid or delay entering institutional settings like nursing homes or emergency rooms. NORCs are also cost-effective as they serve residents on smaller budgets while preventing more substantial costs to the state. For example, the annual cost of a nursing home stay for one individual in New York State can approach $159,000 per year, which amounts to nearly the value of one NORC program contract that serves hundreds of older adults and helps them remain in their homes for longer. More than 1 out of every 4 older New Yorkers age 60 plus live alone. Between 2012 and 2022, the number of older adult New Yorkers living alone has increased by 21%, from 1 million to 1.2 million individuals. 51% of older New Yorkers in poverty live alone, which is 3 times the share of higher-income older New Yorkers living alone. A 2024 report found that the COVID-19 pandemic worsened existing social isolation issues among older New Yorkers, particularly older adults of color. The U.S. Census Bureau's Household Pulse Survey data from fall 2023 shows that over 30% of Asian older adult New Yorkers and 42% of Latinx older adult New Yorkers reported feeling down, depressed, or hopeless. NORC programs often help mitigate the negative impacts of loneliness and social isolation that older adults living alone experience by offering a variety of services and activities, including civic engagement and volunteer opportunities for older adults that can help strengthen communities and improve overall mental health. These can include bus trips to local grocery stores, hot meal deliveries, games, intergenerational karaoke nights, dance and workout classes, and so much more. The physical health benefits of the NORC model are clear, too. As part of their contracts, many NORCs provide critically important primary health care to older adults through on-site NORC program nurses. This leads to higher immunization and screening rates among older adults in NORCs than in older adult populations in New York City. Unfortunately, many NORC programs are struggling to meet their New York City aging contracted requirements for on-site healthcare and nursing hours because NORC contracts do not fully fund the required nursing services. This has traditionally forced providers to rely on pro bono nursing services sourced from hospitals, nursing students, or retired volunteers, but shifts in the healthcare sector have made these arrangements untenable and have left providers struggling with an unfunded mandate. Despite repeated calls to baseline funding for on-site nursing staff at NORCs to ensure continuous access to primary and preventative care for older adults, this administration has so far declined to do so. Recognizing the critical importance of promoting easy access to high-quality health care, this City Council has stepped in to provide supplemental funding for NORC nursing at NYC Aging contracted NORCs as part of the broader NORC Council initiative, which was funded at $5.2 million in fiscal 2024. But providers and older adults deserve the peace of mind of permanent funding for this care. At a time when New York City's older adult population is growing exponentially, the city should be investing more, not fewer, resources into supporting our older adults. NORCs allow older adults to age in place with dignity in tightly bound communities that foster social connections and healthy lifestyles. These investments would have a major impact on our city's public health outcomes, alleviate the mental health crisis facing older adult communities, and save the city and state a ton of money in the longer term. It is critical that the city commits to a comprehensive plan to expand the number of NORCs across the 5 boroughs to accommodate more older adults, and that it commits to providing the funding and resources necessary for NORCs to provide high-quality and comprehensive supportive services, including on-site nursing care. Our older adults need that commitment and support. Thank you to the advocates, members of the public, and representatives from the administration who are joining us today. I would also like to thank my staff, Casey Addison and Andrew Wright, and Aging Committee staff, Christopher Pepe, Chloe Rivera, and Samuel Hamid.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Commissioner, Executive Deputy Commissioner. If you could please raise your right hands for me. Now, in accordance with the rules of the Council, I will administer the affirmation to the witnesses from the mayoral administration. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony before this committee, and to respond honestly to council members' questions? Commissioner? I do. Executive Deputy Commissioner? You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for the gift of time that family obligations kept me from being here promptly as I normally do. So good morning.
Good morning.
I am glad to be sitting down and settled. Chair Hudson and members of the Committee on Aging, as you know, I am Loren Cote Vasquez, Commissioner of the City Department for the Aging, and I am joined today by Ryan Murray, our Executive Deputy Commissioner and Chief Program Officer. I'm going to thank you for this opportunity to discuss NORCs, the naturally occurring retirement communities, and how New York City is working to protect, preserve, and support these important institutions. Again, I always thank you for your advocacy. New York City Aging funds 36 NORCs throughout New York, where we contract with providers to administer aging services to their residents. This is a separate form of affordability components of housing and older adult housing in New York City, as New York City does not construct, maintain, or place older adults in housing. Instead, our primary focus is on the social service provision to the residents of a NORC. As you know, New York City's population, and you have aptly said in your opening remarks, it is aging rapidly. And we expect that the share of older adults in the 5 borough to grow as the entire baby boom generation is now over 60. New York City is focused on ensuring that the social supports and aging services which allow older New Yorkers to stay in their community and age in place are available and accessible where they live. This work, in addition to the many other programs and services offered by New York City Aging, includes addressing ageism, which is still the last critical pervasive social injustice with a level of acceptability for discrimination in society. That is why I am pleased to discuss this topic with you today during June, which is Pride Month, and also just after Older American Month. Later this month, on June 15th, we will commemorate World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, which magnifies the achievements we have made in combating elder abuse. NORCs play a special role in supporting LGBTQIA+ older adults and combating elder abuse crimes by creating the communities where neighbors look out for one another and where older adults can find support services in the very buildings or blocks where they live. NORCs come in very different types and functions, and I look forward to discussing these with you today. A naturally occurring retirement community, NORCs, or as they are commonly known, is a multi-age housing development or a neighborhood which was not originally intended to house older adults, but now is home to a significant number of them. Throughout New York City Aging funded NORCs to provide a range of services such as case assistance, healthcare options, assistance with benefits and entitlements, recreation or other activities, on-site nursing services, and ways of connecting socially for the residents. NORCs help older adults remain in their communities and age in place by utilizing these NYC-funded services and programs to provide the necessary supports which they may need possible. To be considered a NORC, a building must have at least 350 senior residents, with at least 40% of those households including an older adult. Or the complex or the building has at least 1,500 older adult residents, regardless of the percentage of units they occupy. We know that in Lefrak City, Co-op City are examples of those. A neighborhood NORC is a geographically defined area with no more than 2,000 residents aged 60 plus who occupy at least 40% of the households. The buildings must be 6 stories or less and or single or small multifamily housing. A majority of the residents must be low to moderate income. These standards were first defined through practice in 1986 when New York City's Penn South Houses in Chelsea became the first identified NORC and set up a program with financial assistance from UJA federated agencies. This program, known as Penn South Program for Seniors, served the aging population of the development 25 years after it had been constructed. This first NORC program served as a legislative model for New York State to establish NORCs in the Elder Law of 1994, which formalized the state process for identifying and funding NORC services. New York City did the same in 1999 through the FY 2000 City Council budget process and established funding based on the state's models and definition for NORC. As I said earlier, there are 36 NYC Aging funded NORCs and 24 discretionary funded NORCs from the City Council, which New York City Aging then contracts out services to a provider. NORCs come in a range of housing types, including NYCHA, privately run rental buildings, limited equity and housing development fund corporations, co-ops, or Mitchell-Lama, or former Mitchell-Lama developments. NYC Aging allocates services to providers through a request for proposal process, and that's timed. The last one was timed with the older adult RFP. While many of the social service functions found in a NORC are similar to what you see in OACs or older adult clubs, a key difference is that NORCs do not provide meals in a congregate setting for local residents. Nonetheless, due to the size of a NORC and its position within local communities or neighborhoods, OACs are frequently located nearby and may even occupy the same building. There's a few examples like that. Because NORCs are in fact naturally occurring, there are often questions surrounding, like, what is identified first? The older adult who make up the NORC or the service provider who can facilitate NORC aging services? And then the group of older adult residents is identified. In reality, this happens in tandem through the RFP process when funding is identified to provide NORC services and NYC Aging completes educational and outreach to nonprofits or community-based organizations who can provide necessary services to these identified communities. NORC programs in New York City have five primary program expectations. These are: provide case assistance through professional staff for older adult needs, linkages to outside agencies or support, provide healthcare assistance including consultation, screening, and monitoring, NORC-specific case management for all residents whether they are homebound or not, NORC healthcare management including the development of a care plan for residents, and 5, build and develop health promotions with outside providers to address negative health impacts. These program elements are fundamental to preserving the long-term housing viability of New York City's older population. NORC staff are able to intervene when needed to ensure that older adult residents are receiving appropriate services, help to identify and prevent long-term health care impacts, which will move an older adult into institutional care and or create connections to healthcare providers in the area, which can improve the overall outcomes for all of the older adults' health. NORCs ultimately are population-designated area which over time have naturally met the qualifying criteria previously mentioned. This allows an eligible provider to apply in an RFP for contracted supportive services and programming in that designated building or neighborhood. Because of New York City's multi-generational housing makeup, it is entirely possible, and I've said this before in other hearings, that it is entirely possible that entire city is made up of 40% of households with at least one older person residing who is 60 plus. Well, that this does not mean that New York City as a whole is a neighborhood NORC. You can understand that these elements which make up a NORC are present throughout the city. I say, or I project, that at some point after 2030, all of New York City will be a NORC. That is why NYC other key services such as OAC programming, home-delivered meals, home care and caregiving support, legal services, and geriatric mental health programs are fundamental to the success of overall programs and services. In particular, intergenerational programming is a key opportunity to expand programming in an impactful way, which NORCs are uniquely positioned to take on in the future. You know, and I've said that the anchors of these two cities, the two anchors of this city are the older population and the younger population. Additionally, NORC provides services which are different from what is seen in an OAC because of their unique positions in people's homes and communities. They include healthcare management through nursing services, which is a really added value, civic engagement through interactions with the case assistance staff, and working with housing management issues to address long-term housing issues experienced by older adults. These are the key services which help to prevent older adults from moving into institutional care and keep them in their homes and communities that they have built for longer. I'm going to give you a few examples of some interesting successes. At Educational Alliance Co-op Village, NORC, on the Lower East Side, older adults were concerned that they may lose a bus stop during the Manhattan 14 bus design. NORC staff helped to organize the older adults and develop an advocacy campaign to interact with the local elected officials, community boards, and other partners to maintain the stop on the route, which ultimately they were successful in doing. Another example is at the Center Light Parkchester NORC in the Bronx. Older adults did not have a laundry facility on site and used the local laundromats. This became difficult for older adults at a time. As time went on, and the NORC staff assisted them in working with the building management to secure funding and a contract with a provider for laundry facilities on site. These two examples show how NORCs allow older adults to age in place through access through items or services that are necessary and that are a key component of community care, which is what our mantra is for older New Yorkers. Through the work of the Cabinet for older New Yorkers, we have seen the power of intergenerational relationships between young people and older adults in combating ageism. When young people see what older adults experience and feel they too are connected to an older adult's experience, that bond is what breaks the cycles of ageism. NORCs provide an opportunity for this collaboration between older adults and young people because they live in the same communities and many times in the same building. Those linkages between NORC programming and providers also work with young people, form a natural fit for fostering intergenerational programming. We recently held a My Story New York culminating event on May 24th where intergenerational projects were presented. Some of those projects took place at NORCs with NORC residents and with providers who run youth program, older adults, as well as NORC programs. Overall, as the growing number of older adults continues to increase in New York City, and those older adults want to age in place, we need to seek innovative models of NORC programming in the future. We appreciate the Council's partnership with NYC Aging in funding 24 NORCs through discretionary dollars. This investment continues to serve the needs of the older adults. Because of that historic investment over the years, I anticipate that there's a lot of interest in how we identify or how we can have more NORCs, given the growing number of older adults in the 5 boroughs. We anticipate the release of an upcoming OAC NORC RFP, and we will have more information to share with our providers and the Council on what can be expected for NORCs and their service providers. We will also have data on the demographics of particular communities. As always, NYC Aging is committed to providing quality services and programming to New York City's older adult population. I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I'd like to acknowledge that we've also been joined by Council members Banks, Brewer, and Mealy via Zoom, and I want to turn it over to Councilmember Brewer to give her opening statement.
Thank you very much. I'm here in person, just FYI. I do want to thank the chair for including Resolution 232 on the agenda today. As she said earlier, it calls on the governor to sign bills in Albany that call for the annual adjustment of the maximum income threshold eligibility for SCREE and DREE and SHE and D by any increase in the consumer price index. I have to say, if you, certainly in many districts, residents who are older, this is a huge issue in the constituent office. While Social Security benefits increase to match cost of living, the income thresholds of each one of these programs do not. This puts older adults and people with disabilities at risk to lose access to these programs as increases in Social Security raise their incomes above the set thresholds. Even $1 throws you off. So I hope everyone will sign on. We can ensure that the 70,000 plus households in New York City receiving SCREE or DREE or other benefits continue to do so. But we hope and we'd love to get a number, if you have one, Commissioner, as to how many more would be involved. I do want to thank Hallie Chu from the office of State Senator Brian Kavanaugh, who worked for me. They both worked for me in the past, and they are moving the state bill forward. My guess, according to the bill, but we don't know for sure, is it could move the income up to $61,224. That would make a huge difference. And I urge everybody to support this bill. I know that Senator Liz Krueger has called because as soon as we pass this, which I hope we do today, tomorrow, then that will help the state pass the bills and get the governor to sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. Very meaningful legislation. We will be voting on it tomorrow morning, so.
Right.
Thursday morning, sorry, not tomorrow morning. Thursday morning. I don't even know what day it is. All right, we'll start off with some questions. Commissioner, can you discuss the history of NORCs in New York City? When and why did they start?
The why did they start? Huh? I can't tell you the why that they started. I think it was just Manhattan Penn was the first example of the NORCs. I can't give you that history. I mean, I just think it was exactly that. It was a naturally occurring situation. Manhattan Penn South started, and 25 years after it was built, it was designated as the first NORC, and I think that's from there came the evolution. All right.
Thank you. Councilmember Brewer, did you have any color you wanted to add to that?
I do.
Good.
There are two people, Anita Altman, who was working for UJA, and Freda Vladik, who was
Right,
working for the
UJA.
United Hospital Fund. We call them the godmothers of this program. And it was pretty much hell at the beginning. Nobody believed that it could happen. Penn South is a great example, but it was the easiest one because Mr. Smith was head of the co-op there and really believed in both affordability and supporting the seniors. Other buildings did not. So these two women pushed it forward. When I say 500-600 meetings, I am not kidding. I think I was in most of them. And so it's probably the greatest program for seniors ever, and I want to thank all of us for continuing it, but they need more money. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Brewer. All right, Commissioner, I'm looking for some data.
Okay.
So the number of DFTA or NYC Aging funded NORCs and their locations, and then you mentioned 36 NORCs that are funded by NYC Aging, 24 that are funded by us here in the City Council. Are any of those overlapping, or do any of those refer to 36 completely separate from the 24, right? Okay.
Right. And I'll tell you I can tell you where the 36 NORCs are by borough. all
Okay.
right, if you want that numbers. In the Bronx, we have 5 NORCs. In Brooklyn, there are 6. In Manhattan, there are 16. In Queens, we have 9, and there are none in Staten Island. That's probably will change in the very near future. The New York City Aging serves about 19,000, almost 20,000 older adults in FY23. Those are the clients that we know that are receiving services in the NORCs. All right.
And can you just tell me how that's calculated? Is it by the number of older adults that are residents or those who utilize the services in the
It's
programming?
the number of adults who utilize the services, who are considered clients, and that's a unique number. There's not duplicates.
Do you have any sense of those who utilize the services versus those who actually live in the building? Like, of the number of folks who utilize the services, do you have a percentage or a number of
Yes, we do.
who actually lives in the building?
In the Bronx, the number is around 3,000, hovers around 3,300, and they represent 17% of the population. In Brooklyn, the number is 3,500, and they represent 19%. In Manhattan, it's about 8,000, a little tad over 8,000 clients, 8,300, and they represent 44% of the residents. In Queens, they represent 20%.
What's the number? Sorry, for Queens.
3,836. And in Staten Island,
And sorry, the percentage of that 3,800?
20.
20%. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Can you explain the difference from Manhattan, where 44% of the residents, or 44% of your clients are residents, versus the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens, which all have around 20%, which is half?
I think it's the same people elect to participate or not, and they may elect to participate for one service versus another. I don't know that. I would say Manhattan having the highest number, maybe that sort of proportion. They probably have the highest number of residents also. So I believe that would be an explanation for that. I don't know that we can say that there is any determining factor other than choice.
Okay. How does the number you provided, so 19,000 in fiscal year 23, how does that compare to those served over the past 5 years?
I can get you that number.
Okay. And do you have the median age, gender, race or ethnicity, and languages spoken by older adults served by NORCs?
Yes. I can give you that now. Citywide, 55% of the NORC residents are 75 and older, which makes absolute sense because they're aging in. And 45% are between 60 and 74, which is the nature of a naturally occurring retirement community. 74% of the NORC residents are women, which makes sense. Women outlive men, and 26% are men. 55% of NORC residents are white, 23% are Asian, and 21% are African American and Black. And the reason for that, you can know, is the historical housing patterns of New York City. And when some of the Mitchell Lamas and some of the NORCs were first developed, they were not in particular communities. And then 67% of the NORCs speak English, 20% speak Chinese, 14% speak Spanish, 10% speak Russian, and 1% speak Korean.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm furiously writing my notes here. Do you know the median cost of rent in a NYC NORC? And then disaggregated by number of bedrooms and borough?
I can't give you.
The disaggregated numbers?
Yeah, I can't give you rent because, we don't place them in housing. We don't know. They're also disparate. We can try to do an analysis and try to figure out that rate, but
Okay.
like in Lefrak City, it would be dependent on someone's income, so it's very hard to figure out what the average rate would be.
Okay. Well, I would appreciate your best effort.
Yeah, we will.
Okay.
We'll give you the best perfect answer we can
Okay,
get to.
that sounds good. And then similarly, the median cost of a co-op or condo in an NYC NORC.
It goes
would be
again.
great. Yeah.
It's the same thing.
But if you could
It's
throw
the
that in there.
development, we'll look at that, see what the average is currently, and give you some best guesstimate.
Okay, if you could also share with us just the full number of the full list of the NORCs that you fund, then that would be helpful.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay.
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 Sure.
Thank you.
And I have the list of the NORCs that you fund also.
Right. We'll take both.
All right.
Thank you. With regard to programming at NORCs, what measures are in place to ensure all eligible residents are aware of the services provided by their NORC?
As with older adult clubs, it is much easier outreach and education is much easier. No one is prohibited from participating in their NORC services. But it's the strength of the provider in engaging with the community and the residents. It's that it determines participation, more or less.
So you don't have any formal measures in place to ensure that the providers are doing specific outreach or anything like that?
Other than them developing, each of our providers gets outreach and education money, and that's part of their plan.
And then do you know if there are specific outreach efforts for non-English speaking and digitally disconnected older
All
adults?
of our services, we will provide everything in the language of that particular community. and or the changing community. If you are more than, what's the number, 20%, then we then make sure that that population is addressed.
Okay, thank you. How do NORC administrators determine what type of programming to offer?
I would say no different than an OAC. You do it based on client needs and client interest. And you have this array of services, and you provide those that are most adaptable. What I will say is that most NORCs, just because of the nature of a NORC, have some health-related component. They'll either have a nursing, they'll have a partnership with a community health facility. That is integral to being a NORC, which is not, you do not find that in OACs.
And then how are NORC residents engaged in the decision-making process?
There are advisory councils in each one of the NORCs. So like the older adult clubs, there are advisory council who also participate in that process.
Great. And do you ensure such programming is culturally appropriate and sensitive?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Are you able to describe any programming or services that are provided in languages other than English?
Oh my God, there's so many. I can get you some examples of that. All right?
Okay.
But there's so many. I mean,
Just give
I
me
don't
like
even
your
know
top
what,
3 to 5.
What would be culturally appropriate that is not now norm, right? Like Tai Chi or Zumba or, drumming, all of that is culturally
Okay.
appropriate to
Those-
somebody, but welcomed by all.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. Well, I'll take those as your examples for now, and then we'll follow up with the full list. That would be helpful. And then, can older adults who do not reside in a particular NORC access its services and/or programming?
No. For anybody who does not live in the NORC, we encourage them to participate in OACs, which are usually in the neighboring community.
Okay. And what are the most in-demand services and programming at NORCs?
I
Broadway?
Tickets to Broadway.
Oh, tickets to Broadway.
It's my mother's, my home care service needs. It's what I've been taking up my time with.
Home care service?
Yeah, no.
Oh, you're
That's
just-
my home care. That's
gotcha.
my mother's
Oh,
home
gotcha,
care
gotcha.
attendant. Let me get myself.
You need to take a minute?
No. But no, I won't.
We can pause for a second.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
You can answer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
committee. So the in-demand services, in the commissioner's testimony, we shared a range of services from case management, case assistance. So those are some of the top in-demand programming when we look at what folks are budgeted for and invoicing on. We also have, obviously, info and referrals for various services and education. There's a ton of work that happens. To your question about programming available that's tailored and culturally appropriate, a lot of that work is health education, the case management. Those are the top services, and we're happy to provide you with more numbers.
Great. And if you can get that disaggregated by borough too, that would be helpful.
Sure.
There's a NORC services provider finder on your website. Can you explain why that would be up on your website if it's not available to people who are not living in a NORC?
Sure. So the services finder, I believe that you're looking at on our website is for all services available in New York City. What you would acknowledge is For the providers who are there, although we do require in our standards and in our follow-up that there's an annual plan to engage folks who live there, we also want to make sure that if there's anyone who is looking for those services, say a caregiver, a friend, someone who might be in the building who is somehow not aware of the services, that as they're looking for various options that they can find those services digitally as well as through the old-fashioned door-to-door engagement that happens.
Okay, thank you.
We're not holding information hostage. We want to make sure it's known to all.
Absolutely.
Hostage. I feel hostage today.
Is it possible to make that more clear on the website, specifically pertaining to NORCS and who the services at NORCS are actually provided for?
Of course.
Okay, thanks.
Good suggestion.
All right, how does the city intend to increase the number of NORC residents served over the next 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years? As we know, obviously, we've both stated in our testimonies the growing population.
I think one way that we're looking, obviously, funding is a major determinant of whatever increases and how it can increase. So that's a major determinant. What we do, as we do with older adult clubs with NORCS, is that we look at patterns of growth in particular communities. We look at the demographics of that growth and how best to serve it. And we also work, and I think of Councilman Cornegie when he wanted to have a NORC in his neighborhood. It was a 3-year process, but we were able to identify the housing that he was talking about. And in that one, I believe it was a geographic NORC, not a building. And it was a 3-year process, and then he funded it. So those are the ways that we can do that. But it's constantly looking at where the growth is and where the shifts are, because sometimes it's decreasing in Manhattan or stable in Manhattan, but the growth is happening exponentially in Queens and Brooklyn, and then in the West Bronx. So we're looking at, at those patterns constantly, and where should resources be, and to whom those resources should go, because it's also a matter of, and maybe I'm going a little more than what you're asking, but for me, it's also, for us, for all of us, I know the intention is equity, so that it's reflective of that particular community and governed by that community, so that that community can best serve its constituents.
But so you've outlined essentially, I guess what's missing is like an actual plan. So you follow the data, you see the data, you watch the data, but there isn't a plan where money specifically is allocated or directly correlated with that data. So if we know in 10 or 15 years that population is going to increase in Queens or Staten Island, for example, so in 10 or 15 years, we need to make sure that the budget reflects the needs in that community. There's no plan that's in place that says NORCS, we have 36 NORCS currently. In 5 years, we'll have 40 NORCS. In 10 years, we'll have 50 NORCS with probably the greatest increase in this borough or that borough. That doesn't currently exist, correct?
And that doesn't exist for NORCS because it's tied to housing. So not knowing where all of the housing developments will be, we can tell you where population will be.
Right.
We don't know what the corresponding housing will be.
But there are NORCs that are,
but they're geographic NORCs.
Right.
Like with geographic NORCs, it's manageable in the sense of projecting, just as we do for OACs, right? So that is population and geographically determined. The component that is the distinction in Norks is the housing development part of it. So it's harder to do. We do have a plan that we forecast where the growth will be. We do not, we don't, and that's the missing element in our planning process is, and it will take X millions of dollars to support X
Right.
millions of OACs. We do that in the shorter term when we're doing with the OAC and the NORC RFP. When we release that, we say this is the amount of money that we have. This is the number that we could support, and these are the areas where we designate they should exist. And based on that, but that's a shorter term. You're talking about a longer term, and we do that by doing population shifts, but we don't attach, which is we attaching a dollar amount to that growth pattern as to what would be the services that correspond to that.
Right, because we know, it's cheaper. The city would save money, and the state, if we would actually invest in NORCs or communities that we know will eventually become NORCs, rather than,
Right.
having folks that are institutionalized or not able to age in place
yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah,
So it would be
yeah.
great to say, not only would this be the number of dollars we would or should allocate, but it'll also save us, you know.
And and you just raised, it's something that we could raise through in the cabinet, which HPD say these are our projections.
Look at us collaborating.
Yeah. Yeah. What?
I said, look at us collaborating on the spot.
Yeah. No. But we always do that. You gave me the idea. You stimulated the idea. Not you gave me, but you stimulated the idea of the kitchen renovation plan. I mean,
Right.
that to us has been. It was like an aha, and then we looked at each other. It's like,
Why don't we do
didn't
that?
think of
Yeah.
this? So, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I
we
think
could
that's a
do
great
that.
project
We
with
could
the
do that as
cabinet.
part of the cabinet with HPD,
Yeah.
and start saying, if you're going to develop, these are the growth patterns. These are the things that you should be looking at in
Absolutely.
terms of older adults.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What metrics does the city utilize to consider expansion with regard to population growth and location? So I know you mentioned it, but do you use any specific data, like the American Community Survey data from the
we
Census
use all
Bureau?
of those, all of those
Okay.
data elements. Latest census, American survey, other health and health surveys and demographics, our own needs assessment,
Mm-hmm.
our own data.
And is the city aware of any NORCs that are not officially designated as such?
Not to my knowledge, no.
No buildings or communities that would qualify as NORCs but haven't been designated.
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
The way that would happen is that they would request to be considered a NORC, and then there's a process for that.
Okay. But I guess, so without consideration, there's no data that you all have or are looking at that would
Right.
tell you whether or not.
Right. I'm trying to wrap myself around the question and get to
Yeah. So I'll give an example. Like, in my district, there are a number of Mitchell-Lama buildings that are in one particular area that I'm sure would qualify as a NORC. But,
Yeah.
they're not officially designated as such. Are there other areas or buildings or communities like that across the city that you all may be aware of might qualify but haven't been officially designated?
That is interesting because it's a state designation. So what we could do is circle back to the state to see if they have any in the queue that they are looking to designate as NORCs, but none to our knowledge at this point.
Okay. And then can you describe the RFP process and any plans to expand NORCs this year and over the next 5 years?
In the RFP process, it will be determined by the availability of funding. At a minimum, the goal is to retain what we have, and at a maximum is to increase some that have and are designated, should funding allow.
Okay, and when is the next NORC RFP planned for?
The NORC the last one was 3 years ago, and it'll be done sometime in 2025.
2025.
Five.
Thank you.
Probably the spring of 2025.
Okay.
Yeah.
And will it be coupled with the OAC RFP again,
Yes, it would.
despite being different program models?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because it gives us a wider view of services for older adults in geographic
Beyond
areas.
just the NORC. Got it. How many NORCs will be part of the next RFP? Do you have any idea?
At a minimum, we will have the 36 we have, and at a minimum, you will have the 16 or 24 that you have.
So,
Your NORCs are not considered part of the RFP. I do not believe they are. They are.
but they could
I was just
potentially.
corrected. I was just corrected. They are part of.
They are part of
they
the
are
RFP.
part of
Okay.
the process.
Well, certainly we hope to have
More.
than
Yeah.
that total. Okay. How would an older New Yorker who's interested in moving into a NORC do so, and where would they find information about vacancies?
It's like the housing question of the year of New York. NORCs, where NORCs are it's known. It's how do you get in to those complexes. Some of them are years, waiting lists, and it's an elaborate process. They vary so differently. Co-ops, NYCHA, Mitchell-Lama. So they have so many variables that determine that, income, availability. With a 1% housing vacancy rate, that's a challenge.
So if someone were to call Aging Connect, would they help match them to a NORC? I guess this, to me, seems like another project for the cabinet, because there should be some sort of, especially for the programs, for the buildings or programs that are managed by HPD, as an example. If HPD knows the vacancies, they should somehow be communicating that to you all, so that you all might be able to help or aid somebody in being connected. I'm sure HPD does it, but they may not ask the question specifically about the NORC. They may
Right.
just say, how do I get into this
So
building?
if someone calls Aging Connect about where is a NORC in Brooklyn, we can tell them that. What we cannot help them with
Is getting in.
is getting in. And what we can tell them is how to get in and what the process is.
Which would be
But-
the general, either NYCHA or
Right,
Mitchell-Lama, or whatever the
NYCHA, if you're
process.
Section 8, they just open it. We can give the basic housing information, but there is absolutely no direct correlation between making the request of where's the NORC in my community and my moving into a NORC.
Okay. I've got 2 or 3 more questions, and then I want to jump to some of my colleagues. Or actually, before I jump to my next question, is the city engaged in any efforts to preserve the affordability of units in established NORCs, both for existing tenants and vacant units? So not NYC Aging isn't, but
No,
Perhaps,
we're
okay.
not. We're not, and I can't answer for HPT. I'll be able to inform them.
and why doesn't the city fund neighborhood NORCs as the state does? Do you know why?
The state funding for NORCs comes through us. I don't think the state designates and pays for fund
For
NORCs.
neighborhood NORCs specifically.
Yeah.
But why doesn't the city fund the neighborhood NORCs?
The geographic ones you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. So we fund geographic NORCs through this construct that we call older adult clubs. And so if you think about an area where more than 20% of the population are older adults, we have this other opportunity for older adults to participate.
Okay. The state NORC statute was recently updated to allow for neighborhood NORCs to include residential buildings more than 6 stories tall. This change in the law, if adopted by NYC Aging, would allow for less dense areas of New York City to benefit from the NORC program. With this in mind, will NYC Aging consider expanding the NORC program to include neighborhood NORCs?
We've never excluded neighborhood NORCs. We work directly with the state definition. We don't have a different definition for NORCs in New York City. We follow the state, which is modeled after the federal. And so there's no distinction there.
Okay. One last question. In your testimony, in the very last bit, you mentioned the need to seek innovative models in NORC programming in the future, and I was just wondering what you meant by that specifically, and if you could provide examples of what innovative models in NORC program might include.
Well, expanding, if the goal is community care and to avoid institutionalization until the individual desires otherwise. So it would be adding transportation, stronger affiliations with health of services, stronger mental health supports. And I have a team that's going to have 8 eyes just burning at me when I say this. Also to consider some kind of supplemental meal service there. And there I knew that. That's why I didn't look over that way. But
That's okay. You're the only one with the mic. So.
But if I were to think of a full service operation at NORCs as more and more of them grow, that is what I would. And particularly because people from the outside cannot go there, even though anyone can go to an older adult club. But there is something about my neighborhood,
Right. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Brewer, followed by Councilmember Lee.
Okay. Thank you very much. On the NORCs, I've got a couple of NORC questions. So my understanding, as you suggested, is the contracts do require health management services,
Yes.
but they don't all have the money for a nurse. And, I think I know all 44% of the ones in Manhattan.
I don't doubt that you do.
And yes, I think I started most of them actually, but they don't all have a nurse, and they want a nurse. So that's a funding issue. Are you considering that? What's the story?
It's one of the primary services that when we issue the RFP that we look for, and at a minimum that they have a strong relationship with a community health provider.
I know, but they want a nurse.
Yeah.
I know. So is that, in other words, as we're talking and there's a budget discussion, maybe not for this year, but for next year, it seems to me that the NORC should be getting more money. That would be a really good advocacy. Is that something that, as an agency, you're pushing? I know you're going to think about a new RFP, but I want to make sure that new RFP doesn't cut what already exists. That's what happened with the clubhouses.
That's not an accurate statement. We
The
did not
clubhouses,
cut
yes, got cut,
services
but-
at the older adult clubs. What I will say is that as part of the RFP.
Oh, not your clubhouse. It's mental health clubhouse.
Okay,
Not yours.
right,
Not yours.
right,
Not yours.
right.
Don't worry. Not
Yeah.
yours.
So,
I'm just saying, as an administration, there was another situation where current programs got cut. I don't want that to happen with the NORCs. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, our goal is not to have NORCs defunded either.
Okay.
Our goal is to have no older adult services defunded. And I believe that we have common cause on that.
Correct.
As part of the RFP, we always include that nursing is the required it's a preferred service, but at a minimum, they have to have a relationship with the health facility.
I'm letting you know that they are asking me that nurses to be funded because going to the new center, to the Ryan or anywhere else is great, but on-site, of course, part-time even is incredibly important. So I would say that's something should be a goal. The second issue is, one of the reasons I think that you don't have as many is the building has to contribute too. In other words, it's not like, okay, you or I, the council or the administration put the money in, that's it. The building has to contribute. I must admit I have some buildings that won't. So my question is, and I'm just reading this here because I don't know the percentages, The city Newark requires a 50% funding match by community partners, and the state is 25%. So I just didn't know if that's going to change, because obviously the less the building puts in, maybe more of the city or the council have to put in, but we're more likely to get a Newark. So I just wanted to understand that percentage.
I don't believe that there'll be changes to those percentages.
Okay, so we'll still have to be 50%, and the state will be 25%. All right, that just so you know, that presents a no sometimes from the owner of these buildings. That's what I get. So I would say that's a challenge. And then the other issue is.
But even that's a challenge, I would say, a council member, that there has to, one of the things that makes Norks viable and flourish is the partnership.
No, I agree.
And so if there's no investment, you could always look to somebody else.
No, I agree.
Pick up the, thank you.
The only issue is the state puts in 25%, and we put in 50, or mandates 25, and we mandate 50, so they still have skin in the game in terms of the owners, and which is important.
Well,
I
we've had
agree.
the conversation about the state share, that we feel it's inadequate
Okay.
for New York City around, not only in Norks, but in all other services.
Okay.
So that's why I keep asking you to advocate with your state partners to make sure that New York City aging, or older adults in New York City get their fair share.
Okay. The other thing is, I really love the way in which the Norks working with the NYCHA residents take place.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my questions is, do you know how many NYCHA developments or residents participate? Because in my experience, they have been phenomenal. Early detection of mental health challenges, isolation, et cetera, have been profound and then addressed. Fantastic.
We could give you that. I don't have that in front of me right now, which ones
Okay.
are NYCHAs and which ones are other. But I can get you by borough those Norks that are NYCHA related.
Right, because I have to say they have been phenomenal. In terms of Resolution 232, I want to know if you support it. I want to know if you know how many more older adults would be eligible if we did, along the lines of Social Security with a CPI. Would that be a number that you would know? How many more people would be eligible for SCREE, DREE, et cetera?
Oh, for SCREE and DREE.
If it
No, I
was,
can
if
get
the
you
le-
that
if
number.
the law passes in
Right.
Albany, how many
could-
more people?
Yeah, right now, we can get you that number. Right now, the threshold is 50,000. I know the goal now is to get it up to 61 or 62.
62.
But we could do a number of who would be deemed eligible for that. The one thing that I would ask all of us to have partnership around in SCREE and DREE, regardless of whether the income goes up or not, is to really do a strong educational campaign around SCREE and DREE. The faster and the earlier that someone enrolls in SCREE or DREE, the more financially impactful it is to that older adult. So like if you've been living somewhere and you are eligible for SCREE and you've not applied for it, that's years that you have lost economic support.
Right. I totally agree. How much funding, if anything, does the city put toward telling people about this program?
I can get you that. I don't know exactly what we do.
Probably not very much, would be my guess.
I don't know that I would even say that because I don't know the number.
Okay, but I'm saying if you don't know the number, my guess is it's not very much, because you would know it if it was substantial. The one other question I have is, if you had your druthers about this program in terms of the Norks, I'm going back to the Norks now, what would be, how would you determine what buildings, how would you do the outreach? Because no question, anybody who's in a Nork is ecstatic. They just love it. They love going to the museums together. They love going to the knitting classes together. They love doing the reading programs together. But it doesn't seem to have much traction in terms of new ones. And when the RFP goes out, maybe it will. Lincoln Towers does it. That's an example of not being in the program per se, because
Right.
they're all higher income, but they love it. So, I mean, the issue would be for me, not only does it
I don't
have to
think
be
a
within the
Nork
program,
doesn't
but I'd
have-
like to see a lot more effort towards building Norks. What do you say about that?
I would say that those developments and those communities that find themselves in a situation where they meet the requirements to become a NORC, there is a process by which you get designated. And as we did with your former colleague, the one that I know, the experience that I have, with Carnegie was to start that process with that particular area.
Okay. One other question is, just like everywhere else, they're having trouble staffing them because of the cost of the program and the large, delta between a social worker at a NORC and perhaps a social worker at a hospital.
Absolutely.
So again, is there any advocacy for more money for NORCs? They need more money. Obviously, partnership is important, but while we're trying to expand, is there anything going on to try to increase the amount of money allocated to NORCs? Even if you do new RFP, you still have to increase the funding for those that exist, in my opinion.
So the partial answer to that is the good news that the city just did by giving all the nonprofits COLA as well as retroactive
333.
pay. And that almost matches the city employees package. And so that is an attempt to retain staff and possibly recruit additional staff. But there's a labor shortage in aging services precisely because of what you said, Councilmember Brewer. It is when we compete with the school social worker or a hospital social worker pay, it is very, very challenging. We are working currently with the schools of social work to encourage people to go into aging services.
Okay, I mean, I think it's an ongoing problem, and I want to just highlight the nurses, because every single NORC has contacted me about the fact that they either can't pay them because of the allocation, or they can't find them. So we've got to focus on that and not say, oh, they can go to the Ryan Health Center or whatever. I really hope that you will focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Brewer. Councilmember Lee.
Sure. Hi, Commissioner.
Hi.
Good to be with you. So I'll start where sort of Councilmember Brewer left off around the outreach piece, because that was a question I had as well, because I'm in Eastern Queens, right by Nassau. We're transit desert. I have probably the most number of co-ops and condos in my district than any other district in the city. But our co-ops and condos are not necessarily high-rise buildings in one single unit, but it's literally sprawled out 2-story, 3-story units. They're more garden apartments. And some of these co-ops are spread over a certain radius of miles and have about 3,000 units just under one co-op board. So these are very large complexes. And I also have, between my district, 23, as well as Councilmember Palladino in 19, Natasha Williams also in 27. We have a lot of, I would say in Eastern Queens in general, there's a large older adult population that's growing. Yes. We have probably, I would say between that part of Queens, we have probably one of the higher rates of increases in terms of demographics. So how would that work? Because I know you said the RFP is coming out next year. So would it be us recommending units or buildings or complexes to you all, or you have that data already because they're situated already, they're living?
I think it's a combination,
okay.
Council member. I think it's to the fact that we identify an area, it's to the fact that we will go to the state to advocate, for designation, so that they could be ready, at the ready when the RFP comes out, so that they would be able to apply.
Yeah.
But it's a process,
Yeah,
but I do think that the best way is both ways. We identify from our data, but also if there's certain areas or developments, then we could look at that. And by the way, Councilmember Brewer, just for the record, there are 8 of the NORCs are in NYCHA.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, okay, so when that time comes, once the RFP is released, I'll keep a lookout for as well, because I'd love to also see what we can do to get more of them into the
and
pipeline.
I think that you will, Councilmember Salam, you will have the same issue probably. So it might be something that we could look at, particularly given all of the changes in the Harlem community. I have opinion about some of those, but anyway, given all of those changes in the Harlem community, it might be us looking at that demographic also.
Okay. So, sorry, I'm going to jump a little bit. So, and the other point that Councilmember Brewer mentioned, staffing shortage, because when I was running KCS, that was like the number one issue is I'm a social worker myself. We can't find enough people in the mental health sector, public health sector. And we would always have people, I mean, don't get me wrong, we need the hospital systems, of course, but
Absolutely.
we kept losing staff, training them, and then losing them to the hospital staff because our pay salary and pay scale is not high enough to compete with those salaries. Sorry, can I go? Okay. And so, also what we're thinking through the mental health roadmap is how do we get more social workers through the pipeline with scholarships, loan forgiveness opportunities. So have you spoken to some of the nursing schools about that? Or my other question is, and this is just me thinking outside the box in terms of efficiency, but between the older adult centers, the geriatric mental health partners, as well as, the NORCs, is there a way, and I understand that they're all under separate RFPs, but is there a way to sort of almost share staff, right? So if I have a full-time social worker or nurse practitioner at one of my mental health clinics, they're not here full-time, or they're not stacked up with clients per se, which I doubt is the case. But, if there are options or ways
Absolutely.
to cross...
The idea of circuit riding, shared resources, whether it's a van, whether it's a nurse, whether it's a laundromat, those kind of, that's sort of like the innovation. Like, where is it that we build so that we each don't have to build the same thing?
Right.
How do we maximize that? But I'm going to implore all of you, given from where you sit, is that it's parity for social work staff and case assistant staff.
Yes.
That we should have parity in salaries across those, just as we are demanding parity for home care workers. These are, and for kitchen staff, we worked hard to have a kitchen staff study so that we can bring kitchen staff. We're a little even outdated now, but we brought up kitchen staff to market rate so that we would not be losing them after they learned all nutrition and everything. We were losing them to the hospitals. The cooks, all of the kitchen staff. So I'm asking that we start taking a very deliberate approach citywide, but also particularly in older adult services, is expecting salary parity for those people who make that decision to work in older services.
Definitely. Okay, and then also, given that this is more of a specific question around transit, because, with the MTA, I know that we had this conversation at one of the last hearings, in terms of, for the sake of efficiency, I think what they were doing was perhaps skipping some stops. But in districts like mine, where there's a lot of students and seniors that need every single stop, yes, it may take longer, but we don't want to sacrifice having seniors take transportation versus efficiency's sake. So in terms of transportation, because I know with some of the social adult programs, adult day programs, it's different because they have the transportation that's included in the Medicaid, Medicare. That's one of the benefits. But for the NORCs, like the OACs, I know that the OACs, some of them have vans. They may or may not do those services, but how are the NORCs in terms of the transportation? I know for geographic, the idea is that a lot of them are in the same neighborhood, but are there opportunities for us to expand on the transportation within the NORCs as well, if they need to go out?
The current opportunity, limited as it is, the current opportunity is in those borough-wide transportation programs that we provide. I mean, to supplement what Access-a-Ride does or does not do. But the current opportunity is to use those borough transportation services for other than portal to portal. I mean, portal to portal is a local center's responsibility. But if people in New York might need appointments to go to a doctor, or as a group want to go somewhere, that is that limited opportunity we have. We've already talked that is, that's limited because of the amount of money that we have. I think it's $5 million or $5.2 million for transportation citywide. But those are the models that we would be looking to expand to augment those alternative mobility areas, particularly in transportation deserts. And Southeast Queens is a major transportation desert. Bronx, my community, Northeast Bronx is a transportation desert. And handicap accessibility, even
That's a
greater
huge problem.
desert.
Yep. definitely. Okay, two more quick questions, sorry. So in terms of the handoff, like let's just say you come across a senior or older adult that's in a NORC and they need further services that goes beyond what the services are that you have on site. What does the handoff look like? I mean, because I know that you have so many nonprofit partners that offer probably maybe some of those services, but is there, what's sort of like the flow chart, I
have-
guess, of how
You know,
that.
this is going to sound lofty, but I don't mean it to be. I really have the greatest respect and admiration for the case management staff in all of them, whether you're a NORC, whether you're an older adult club, or whether you're a case management agency. They talk to each other, and that kind of network. Should we be doing more to foster that? Possibly. And it might be, it might be something that we could really look at. But those handoffs are usually really, really well coordinated, where one brings you for this service and then that, or this one has the housing expertise, or this one has the mental health services. So I'm really proud of what the network does with each other.
And they have the lists of which groups speak
Which
what
groups
language,
belong
which
to
services
that.
they provide, whether it's mental. Okay.
But what I hear is, what are we doing structurally to encourage that? And that's something that we can take a stronger step on, because we
Right.
know it happens. I'm always in this balance between dictating and encouraging and supporting. But, it's somewhere in between all of that. It's something that we could probably put out the message that coordination is welcomed, encouraged, and incentivized.
Okay. And then I know that every time the RFP comes out, is there room for suggestions, recommendations on perhaps not the regulations, but the requirements? Because as the population changes, maybe some of the requirements that were in the previous RFP no longer exist, or maybe we need to add more. And so I just wanted to know what that timeline looks like in terms of the white paper coming out and when we can give feedback on that.
Well, we're going to base it on the experiences that we have. We will have several community conversations around it before we release the RFP, to share with people what we think, what we've learned, and then people will tell us what we still have not been able to learn. And from there, but the construct will not be different. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
basic operation will not be different. So there's probably not a need for a concept paper, because we're not moving into a new area. We're probably defining within the margins
Okay.
of what the population is. So we will do a lot of community conversations to get as much information
Okay.
as we possibly can.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And we're giving ourselves enough time, even if we have to extend contracts, to give ourselves enough time so that we can build. And we also need the time to make sure that what the funding resources are and how many we can release, contract with, whatever.
Thank you, member. Thank you, council member.
You want to say something, Ryan?
Sure. The additional thing I would add is that part of the NORC program that is special, and I think where we structure a lot of the collaboration is they have not just the usual advisory boards, but partner boards as well, where they're always looking at what service shifts need to be. So as the commissioner said, absolutely, the case manager, case assistant, staff director, social workers where they exist, the visiting nurse service where that's a shared partnership, all of them are working with the housing provider, with everyone on site, to think about what new linkages might be required in a particular community. So while our standards dictate, as the commissioner would say, how often one meets to encourage that collaboration, what happens often is folks are required and doing the work on the ground, as the original NORCs did, by the way, because it was organizing in labor and folks saying there are different services needed here, going out and thinking about what additional services are needed for that particular NORC. Some of those investments, as the commissioner mentioned, are the formal match, others are in kind, and that is part of the expectation.
Good. Yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. So I just wanted to clarify, you do or do not fund neighborhood NORCs?
How many NORCs are geographic NORCs? Do we have that? No, none.
None, okay.
Okay. Yeah. No,
That's it, no, okay.
no.
Okay. And then I wanted.
Even in Co-op City, even though you would consider that, like I've
geographic-
always gotten that confused, and they always correct me. I've always think of Co-op City
As a-
obviously, as a
as a
neighborhood,
neighborhood
NORC.
NORC, right.
Right, but we have buildings in Co-op cities that
Right.
are NORCs.
Right.
So.
Okay, that's
so
an
that's why
important
it's-
distinction. And then just to recap, the state has exclusive designation authority for NORCs.
Yes.
And then what is the state's criteria for designation? And does it match the criteria for the RFP that you put out?
It would have to. The RFP would have to match the state designation.
The state designation.
Right. So the state designation is 50% of the housing units have an older adult, 60, and the complex or building has at least 2,500 older adults. That's the New York Classic NORC definition, right? New York State. And then they have, if it were a geographically defined area, it has to have 20,000 residents, 60 plus, and or occupy at least of those which occupy 40% of the households. And I can see that happening in smaller rural areas where they have those kind of designations. And the building must be 6-story, but you know that has just changed. And the majority of the income must be moderate to low income defined by HUD guidelines.
Okay, I think there's some confusion with past RFPs and what's been required with reference specifically to the state designation of NORC. So moving forward, will the RFPs match the state designation or the RFP
If
requirement?
there was some confusion, I'll look into that, but that is not my understanding. So if you believe there is some, point that out to us so that we can see where that happened. But we would follow the state requirement because we don't have a city NORC designation.
Definition, right, okay. Okay, that's helpful. And then, can you work with the Department of City Planning on anticipating needs for NORCs? This is just going back to the conversation
To
we
the
had
planning
earlier about.
conversation, yeah.
Okay,
That's a source of data for us always.
okay. The council funds several standalone NORCs through the NORC initiative. Will NYC Aging consider baselining them or contracting with them in the near future?
That would be looking at funding availability and see if they can be baselined in the future. I mean, we welcome the partnership.
So do we.
Good answer. Fast answer.
Has NYC Aging assessed the true cost of expansion and what this would take? I'm going to guess no based on our previous conversation, but
No, we look at what
the cost of expansion for the NORC program?
we look at where we would like to be, but we do not do what you said, a plan based on funding availability following the pattern of the growth.
Okay.
Okay? But we know, we do a designation of this is an older adult club in this community. It is overutilized. What would expansion look like there? Same thing with a NORC.
In the executive plan, NYC Aging's fiscal 2024 budget includes $12.3 million for NORCs, which decreases in fiscal 2025 budget to $7.2 million. In both fiscals 2024 and 2025, $7 million in funding is from federal COVID-19 funding sources. For fiscal 2026 and in the out years, the funding for NORCs drops considerably with approximately $155,000 budgeted for each fiscal year. How much did NYC Aging actually spend on NORCs in fiscal 2023, and how much has been spent to date in fiscal 24?
I can give you the 2023 number in a minute. In 2023, we spent $13.6 million in NORCs. In 2024, it is, to date, it is 12.9.
Okay, so I just want to point out that in fiscal '23, you spent more than has been allocated in fiscal '24, and in fiscal '24, you've spent more than was allocated at the 12.3 million, just as a,
Right, we have overspent in NORCs thus far for 2020.
which, I mean, I of course would argue that there's clearly a need for that, and so instead of reducing the dollars allocated for NORCs, that we should be increasing the dollars.
I don't think any one of us would
Would disagree.
dispute that.
Yeah,
But
I'm just stating for the record.
yeah, the issue with that is we're looking at, two things to manage these overages, and that's, the performance reallocation review that we're doing across the board. And so that would be one. And then, of course, we are all aware that in 2025, there's some challenges that we all have to address that I'm confident that we will all address.
Okay, so how specifically does NYC Aging plan to utilize the federal pandemic-related funding budgeted for NORCs in fiscal '24 and '25?
My understanding, and I can confirm that, is that our stimulus dollars were put into transferred to tax levy dollars, so that has been baselined. And I will confirm that, but that is what we said at the executive budget hearing.
I
And you'll correct
Do
me
believe so.
if I'm overstating it or understating
most
it.
certainly I will.
Frankly, I was looking at the council.
No, but I'm pretty sure, yes,
Yeah,
the council
I
will
think-
also correct you. Well,
But
he
I
will tell
think
me to
we-
correct you.
We
but-
said that the money was transferred to city
Yes,
tax levy.
I do recall. Is there a plan to replace this funding starting in fiscal '26, and from which funding sources? And if not, do you know the impact on the NORCs?
I think the executive budget for 2025, the projection right now, we know that it shows some challenges, and that we are going to be working, and we're in conversation with the OMB, the implication of those challenges for 25 and 26.
Okay, and are you seeking assistance from the state for NORCs that are eligible for state funding?
I'm seeking assistance from the state
From
in
everybody.
many areas, and trying to get our colleagues in the aging committee there to say, I mean, of all of the state funding, and I'll say this for the record, with the federal dollars that pass through the state, we get the 45 to 47% that is due us based on population. If I look at the state designated funding, we get as low as 23% and as high as 27%. That is quite a drop of what we are due given a pro rata basis. It's interesting to me because the state Office on Aging has always asked for consideration on a pro rata basis from the federal government. I asked them to follow their own example and their own advocacy for New York City.
As they should. Do you know how many NORCs in your network are eligible for state funding?
I can get you that number. We have it somewhere, but I can get that. I'll get back to you. All of them.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Do all of them get it? No. All right.
They're all eligible, but they don't all
Not
receive.
they all don't get it. Okay. Yeah, that's not significant enough. Go ahead.
That's specifically what they need to look at in terms of.
That's not what this.
Okay. State contracts require 25% matching.
Yes. The state matches 25%.
The state matches 25%, but you're saying the state
Does
in-
not fund all of them
does not do that.
at all, in all situations. Is that accurate? All right. I'll get back to you on that because we have some clarity that I need to get from.
Okay, maybe we
the
can circle
experts.
back
Yeah.
before we wrap today. We just
Okay,
want
great.
we just want to get clarity around the
So,
state stuff.
Audrey,
What they should be doing versus what they are doing.
absolutely. That's the point.
But in the meantime, according to the United Neighborhood Houses March 2024 report titled "NORCs: An Antidote to Social Isolation," NORC programs are facing challenges with hiring and retaining qualified bilingual and trilingual staff as salaries cannot compete with those of hospitals. There's also a need for more mental health counselors while case managers and social workers are asking for higher pay. What, if anything, is the city doing to address these growing professional staffing needs at NORCs?
I think it's a staffing question all the way around. And I believe that one of the opportunities that the city has enabled is the salary increases and the COLA that we've just given nonprofits. And I think that's a step in the right direction to try to mitigate this staffing crisis that we have in older adult services.
Okay, and how does the NORC nursing component work? What are the requirements for healthcare in NORCs, and how are those positions filled? How are they funded, specifically for nursing?
I am not that involved in the nursing part of the NORC. And Ryan, who oversees that program, is going to be answering that question for you.
I think we got to part of the answer earlier when we talked about ensuring that where there are, so your first part of the question, where there are opportunities to leverage existing staff, that we do that. Councilmember Brewer flagged an important point, which is there are nursing shortages and challenges recruiting and retaining professional staff across the board. So one of the things that visiting nurse service, right, which is also funded in partnership with the council, is one of the ways in which we ensure that there are staffing. There's a nurse who might be at a particular development for a certain number of hours a week, and we look at that. So you see the numbers in terms of healthcare management, healthcare assistance, where you're counseling folks on meds. You may not always need a nurse to provide some of those services, but we know that this is preferred in many communities, right? You also have community health education workers, lots of debate in the field. We've done a lot of work to get there, but you would have for visiting nurse service or the partners a certain amount of hours allocated to each development. For those programs that have what we call a network contract, so they have multiple buildings that are part of their contracts, and that's not an insignificant number in our portfolio, you have some sharing of staff. So that's kind of the model that is currently in place. But of course, we go back to absolutely, we want to make sure that we are building pipelines for staffing, making sure that folks are paid, and the COLA that we expect to go through the nonprofits to staff where there's these kinds of needs is one of the things that we've recently invested in.
Great, thank you. How does the council's NORC initiative funding help pay for nurses?
It's included as part of the funding for the NORCs. The other initiative that you had a few years ago was that you funded us for a suite of nurses for the NORCs, and you increased those dollars. It's something that we would love to see repeated, as we have seen for the vehicles.
Noted. So does it go directly to the NORC providers then, or to a central nursing provider?
No, it goes to the
NORC providers, right?
And they determine whether they're part of a pool or shared services.
And is that working
Yeah.
well?
Yeah.
Okay. Research shows that having access to on-site primary health care improves health outcomes for older adults living in NORCs. Unfortunately, while many NORCs are contractually required to offer on-site primary care, this requirement does not come with guaranteed funding from the city. Rather, as previously mentioned, providers have relied on funding from the state legislature and the city council's Nork Council initiative to fill in the gaps. What is NYC Aging doing to alleviate nursing staff concerns that advocates have repeatedly raised at the local and state levels so that providers are not faced with an unfunded mandate to provide this critical care?
I think this is the conversation we're having. So we know what the need is, we know what the requirement is, we know the benefit of that particular service on the outcome of the older adult, and working with all parties involved to secure those services.
Have you been able to assess the true cost of healthcare services provided by the NORC programs and what those services are valued at?
What they're valued at, or
Yeah.
what we would need to continue them? So
What they're valued at?
what they're valued at, no, we do not. But we have looked at what the needs are and what the cost is, and we can give you that. We did that in preparation, I remember, for the funding that we got from the city council.
Okay. And are you advocating to the mayor and OMB for baseline funding for on-site nursing care at NORCS?
We are in constant communication with OMB around the needs of older adults, including the specific needs of NORC and OACs.
So you're constantly in communication, but are you constantly advocating for baselining that funding in that communication?
I always advocate for baselining funding because that is structural and not a time limited.
Thank you. And then do you communicate with the city's hospital systems and other healthcare providers to negotiate on behalf of contracted NORC programs
Yes.
for on-site nursing care?
Yeah. And
Yes.
that's a lot of that work has been even strengthened because of the cabinet.
Yes. Can you talk a little bit about that and share examples of where such communications made an impact in securing agreements, if you have any? And maybe how the cabinet.
I can
Older
get.
New Yorkers
I would
has
love to get
addressed
you
it?
some specific areas, and I'll get back to you on that because
Okay.
we have had some really, we've had some really good impact and inroads in that. And I think one of the other ways that we've done that is indirect but has a lasting effect, is the number of frontline health workers at H&H that we've trained on all of the services for older adults, all of the arrangements and the agencies that we have, which makes it easier for them to sort of create partnerships and arm themselves with information that they didn't have before. And I believe that it's some upwards of 27,000 that we've already trained and given them some insight. So
That's great. Thank you. Are NORC program providers required to share the health data of older adults living in their NORCs, such as immunization rates or the percentage of older adults who have had a well visit or annual physical in the past year, or even cancer screenings?
I am so sorry. I was
That's okay. I'll
distracted
repeat
by
it. That's
yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Are NORC program providers required to share the health data of older adults living in their NORCs, such as immunization rates or the percentage of older adults who have had a well visit or annual physical in the past year, or even cancer screenings?
No, I mean, given HIPAA laws, I'm sure we have a lot of restrictions on what they can share or don't share. We could probably get overview, but I doubt that we can get data that would have an impact on him, me, or one of us.
Yeah, I think just
We can
general.
look at patterns.
General overview numbers, like
Yeah.
all of the residents of this particular NORC have received a cancer screening or an annual checkup or
Yeah.
what have you.
We could do that.
Okay. And have providers shared data with you reflecting any impact to the health of older adults living in NORCs due to decreased access to on-site nurses and primary care? Is it having a detrimental or negative impact on folks as far as you're aware?
No, but as part of our regular monitoring and contract relationship, we get a sense of what the health and well-being is of that particular area.
Okay. You want to add something?
Yeah, I would just add that, as the commissioner said, for those who are participating in our program, we work really closely with the providers to have a health survey in particular, where we understand the services delivered. As we mentioned before, we have info referrals, health promotion, healthcare management programs in place. And for those services we deliver directly, not necessarily the census of the entire building, we can speak to the impact of those services.
Thank you. Do you have the state numbers by chance?
Yeah, so what I would say about the state, so when we spoke earlier about the match, what's required in the funding process from the state is a 25% match by the building. For us, we have a 50% match, and I heard the advocacy to look at those numbers a little differently in the future, but in spirit of partnership and putting some skin in the game, the building, we are talking about a 50% match. So that match is distinct from the other piece, which is when you're looking at fair share of money coming to the city. But the match is really speaking about to the NORCs what's required via that RFP, and that's a different criteria than when we say we need additional dollars from the state.
Copy. But that 25% is being matched.
At the state level, they would have to speak to that. I would assume it is as part of our 50% match. We monitor that. Again, some of that is sometimes in-kind services, space, and others. That match is met by our providers. The state would have to speak to their number.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our questions. Thank you so much to the both of you and your teams.
Thank you for accommodating my family situation today.
Not a problem at all. I'll now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant-at-Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you'll have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic of protecting, preserving, and supporting naturally occurring retirement communities in New York City, or on the resolution being considered today, resolution number 232. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant-at-Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. And I'd like to call the first panel, which is Zainer Lee and Theodora Ziongas. You may begin.
Any order? I'll go first.
Okay.
My name is Theodora Ziongas. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on the impact of NORC programs. My name is Theodora Ziongas, and I am the program director for Self-Help's Big Six Towers NORC in Woodside, Queens. Big Six Towers, it's a Mitchell Lama development with close to 1,000 apartments. For those who don't know Self-Help, we believe that individuals deserve to live with dignity and independence, and every day we provide care that responds to the needs of each person. And our approach is, based on extensive work we've done with Holocaust survivors. Thank you for the past investment in services for older adults, and hopefully you'll be able to continue and expand them. As you know, NORCs were founded with the goal of meeting the needs of a growing cohort of older neighbors. We provide a wide range of services, and we also support, so we provide case management services, healthcare management, quite a few recreational and educational programs, which are vital in helping reduce isolation. Secondly, we also support tying the SCREE, SHE, DRE, etc., to the Consumer Price Index and increasing the income level to, I was hoping 75,000, but I believe it's 62. This is hugely important for our NARC program. Big Six Towers had a 23% increase in maintenance charges last year, and scheduled to have a 10% increase this.
You can continue.
Okay, 10% increase beginning in July. This has had a huge impact on our NORC. We have had many new older adults, coming to us for assistance with applying for services. As you can imagine, such a huge increase on people with fixed incomes is prohibitive. Some of them, especially for those who are at an age, some of them don't qualify by just a few dollars, meeting the $50,000 threshold. So increasing that will be hugely important, and tying the subsidy.
And if you can just wrap up, if you don't mind.
Yes, okay. Our services have a direct and positive impact on the health. 47% of the NORC members live alone, and approximately 45% of the residents who are 60 and over are members of the NORC in our community. We provided over 15,000 hours of case management last year, and over 2,500 participants in our health promotion service programs. So on behalf of all our older adults, we really thank you for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you so much for testifying.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Just make sure you're, yep.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairperson Crystal Hansen and members of the NYC Council Committee on Aging. Thank you for this opportunity to deliver testimony on protecting, preserving, and supporting naturally occurring retirement community in New York City. My name is Sierra Lee, and I am the MSW intern of Klickitat Village, Newark at Hamilton Madison House. Today, I would like to discuss the senior citizen rent increase expansions program and its significant impact on the lives of older adults in our community. The SCREE program has been a lifeline of many seniors in our community, allowing them to remain in their homes despite rising living costs. As we all know, housing is one of the most critical aspects of financial subsidy, especially for older adults who often live on fixed incomes. The SCREE subsidy ensures that seniors are not forced out of their home due to rent increase, providing them with the security and peace of mind they deserved. For instance, I have personally witnessed the positive effect of SCREE on many of our clients. One particularly impactful case involved a 77-year-old client who have been on a disability since she was 33 years old. She was born and raised in Klickitat Village, has never married, has no children, and recently lost her only relative. With her limited income, she struggled to afford her rent. Thanks to the SCREE program, she has been able to remain a stable living situation, continue to offer the basic necessity, and avoid the stress and uncertainty of potential displacement. This program has provided her with the security and peace of mind she desperately needed, allowing her to remain in the home she has known for her entire life. However, with recent economic changes, many of our older adults are finding it's increasingly difficult to meet the current financial eligibility requirements for SCREE. As a result, many risk lost their SCREE subsidy due to slight increase of their income, which could lead to a significant financial burden. This is why I'm advocating for annual increase in the financial eligibility threshold. By doing so, we can ensure that more seniors can access and maintain this crucial support, securing their shorter and overall well-being. The SCREE program not only helps individuals, but also strengthens our communities by ensuring that our older adults can age in place with dignity. I urge this consideration of adjusting the financial eligibility criteria to reflect the current economic relatives and continue supporting our seniors effectively. Thank you for your attention to the matters and for your ongoing commitment for supporting our communities.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to next call up Elizabeth Berger and John Scott. These two are next.
You want to go first?
Sure. Pardon?
You have testimony you want to submit?
Not right this minute. Okay, so,
You can-
hi, my name is Elizabeth Berger. You can call me Liz.
And I just want to confirm that microphone is on. Is the red light on there, on at the bottom?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay now?
Yes.
Okay. I've lived at Independence Plaza since 1976, and I'm not the only one. Many of us who are seniors now moved in when these buildings opened, and it was Mitchell-Lama. Just a little background. In 2004, when it became free market, for several reasons, the new landlord made us a deal. Tenants who earned over a certain amount would be considered LAP, which is Landlord Assisted Program. At that point, he raised our rent as much as possible under our agreement, and then tracked the rent stabilization annual increases plus 1%. But including an extra addition every few years to our rent, which added a lot more. We were not rent stabilized. We did not have access to SCREE. So at 62, our rent continued to rise proportionately. Where am I here? In these last 5 or 10 years, many of us were paying more than $2,000, $2,500 a month for our apartments. If you do the math, it's obvious that if you make less than $50,000, this rent is basically unaffordable. When we had to retire, most of us were using our life savings to stay afloat. To change the cap to $60,000 or more would allow more seniors, many in their 70s and their 80s, who make just over $50,000 and are really struggling to get SCREE and survive. We are, one more paragraph, we are able to get SCREE thanks to appreciate the law passed about 2 years ago. And also so the additional CPI would be a great help during sickness or other unforeseen crises, and maybe even have a tiny bit extra. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your testimony.
And that's that.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John Scott. I'm the president of the Older Adult Senior Center at IPN. And I just wanted to put a face on people that need scree, and Elizabeth is one of those people that is the face. And what the deal is, it's a no-brainer, and I know that the city council is going to pass this resolution. I will say, listening about all the Knox stuff, I'm very impressed with the city council. I'm impressed with our speaker.
Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll make you speaker. But the thing is, we need to put a face on it. I deal with seniors that are 97 years old. So now let's take a look at this. Mitchell-Lamas were built for affordability. The city and state allowed them to buy out of the system. We were willing to buy the building and keep it affordable, but no, the mayor at that time, we're not going to talk about that, he let this other unit buy it, and now there's no affordability, and people are leaving. And we had a fight tooth and nail to get it last year to come under scree, because Mitchell-Lamas come under scree, but private doesn't. So we're post Mitchell-Lama. So what is the face? People are paying $2,000 a month. If you do the math, that's $24,000. $50,000, they're paying 50% of their rent. So in the past, I've worked with our previous Asian Commission, Margaret Chin, and we went from 19 to 50, and now we're kind of like begging, can we go up a little bit? But people can't live on this little bit of increase. Now, if this would have done 2 years ago, like we were fighting, it would be up to 71,000. So I'd like to, first of all, thank you. I know you're going to pass this resolution, and I'd like to thank you for all the work you do. I thank you for helping us seniors, and as I said, our centers are needed, and you do a great job with us, and we have a lot of people that need these services. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for saying all that, and thank you for your testimony. I'd like to next call up Tara Klein and Navnet Kaur. Tara, you can start.
Okay. Thank you so much for convening today's oversight hearings on naturally occurring retirement communities. I was recently told that the last time the council did a hearing on NORCs, it was 2017. So this is really great. Thank you so much for holding this hearing. I'm Tara Klein. I'm the Deputy Director of Policy and Advocacy at United Neighborhood Houses. UNH is a policy and social change organization that represents neighborhood settlement houses in New York. UNH has been a champion for the NORC program for decades in New York. Our members operate 21 NORCs located in New York City that serve over 15,000 older adults. These NORCs are either contracted by the State Office for the Aging or New York City Aging. Many receive funding from the council either as supplemental nursing dollars or as its full funding support. So thank you for mentioning our report that we recently put out, NORCs, An Antidote to Social Isolation. I have a copy of it here if anyone wants to read it. It's also available at unhny.org. The report details the harmful effects of loneliness in older adults and lifts up supportive programs in NORCs as a cost-effective way to bring older adults into meaningful connection with their neighbors and help them stay in their homes safely. The report features a census analysis that highlights the growth in New York State's older adult population, and it compares that with where there are or are not NORCs currently. So, for example, the older adult share of the population in Queens Community District 13, which is Queens Village, Cambria Heights, and Rosedale, rose from about 19% to 27% over the last decade, but there's no NORC in that community district. So we have that analysis available to help with future growth analysis. The report also looks at the healthcare benefits of NORCs and talks with some of our members to demonstrate how these programs are an effective and proven program model that should be invested in and expanded to more communities throughout the state and the city. So for our recommendations, really two big things we want to highlight. The first is just let's expand NORCs. Let's build some more of them. In the city, as we heard today, that means money. That means a budget campaign. So thank you for highlighting that. We are also leading a campaign at the state level to try and get some funding for more statewide NORCs, and we hope you'll join us in support of that campaign in the next year. And then we are also requesting the council initiative be funded at $6.4 million in the FY25 budget. This was a historic high a couple of years ago. It includes, again, nursing and standalone NORCs. And sort of our vision, and this is what happened during the last NORC RFP, is that some of these NORCs that the council funds and starts up can go for a couple of years, and then through an RFP, New York City Aging can absorb them into baseline contracts, and the council can keep building new ones. So that's sort of what we're thinking about for expansion. So I'll end there and also just say we support Councilmember Brewer's resolution on the scree and DREE being tied to the CPI. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Navni Kaur. I'm a staff attorney in the Elder Law Unit in the Legal Aid Society in the Bronx office. The Legal Aid Society appreciates the opportunity to provide testimony on the proposed resolution. My unit represents vulnerable elders in Bronx Housing Court, and we work to preserve their housing, and we help with maximizing their benefits. One of the benefits we assist with is applying for scree and DREE benefits during our representation. We support the resolution calling on the New York State Legislature to pass and the governor to sign the bill, which provides for annual adjustments of the maximum income threshold eligibility for the scree and DREE program. The passing of the bill emphasizes the importance of how laws should be modified to serve the need of the current society, and the bill will allow more tenants to become eligible who are on fixed income that were currently over the current threshold. The scree and DREE program is a very valuable benefit program to our clients because it assists with keeping their apartments affordable. However, we have 3 recommendations on how the program could be more effective. First, under the current construction of the program, when a senior applies at 62, the rent is frozen at the legal regulated rent at that time, in amounts which may or may not be affordable, and it's already a rent burden for the senior on the fixed income. For example, a senior could be receiving the maximum SSI, which is $1,034. They apply for scree, and their rent is frozen at $994. This only leaves the senior about $40 to pay towards their other expenses each month. There's no option under the current law for this frozen rent to be lowered, despite this severe rent burden. Therefore, in order to make sure that the amount the rent is frozen at is an affordable amount, we suggest the frozen scree rent.
You can continue.
Thank you. The frozen scree rent should be set to 30% of their income, ensuring true affordability for seniors on low fixed incomes. Second, many seniors miss the chance to submit their scree application when they turn 62 for many reasons. In order to combat this issue, we propose that the rent be frozen at the amount when the tenant was 62 years old, even if they apply at a later date. The importance of rolling back the rent is to ensure that we do not penalize the tenant for not submitting an application on time. Third, we propose that the scree and DREE should be expanded to units now covered by the good cause eviction law. The good cause eviction law limits landlords from enforcing a rent hike greater than 150% of the consumer price index without an explanation. Expanding the program to cover these units would increase the number of potential affordable apartments where seniors could maintain a long-term tenancy. And lastly, the NORCs, we believe, should play a role in timely submitting the scree applications and recertifications. Although we ensure clients submit their recertification timely when we represent them in housing court, unfortunately, we are not able to help with their annual recertifications after the housing court case is over. So the NORCs can assist with maintaining this very important benefit to prevent unnecessary risk of eviction in the future. I just would like to thank you for the opportunity, and we will be submitting a written testimony with more details.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And then, Tara, I just wanted to ask a question. If you can go into a little bit about the state match 25% versus NYC Aging's 50% requirement?
Sure, and thank you for raising this earlier. So by state law, NORCs that are contracted by New York State Office for the Aging require a 25% match. 50% of that match has to be by the housing provider. In New York City Aging, what we saw in the last RFP was that the match requirement is 50%. Half of that 50% has to be by the housing provider. So this is the discrepancy we were looking at. So according to New York City Aging, they follow the state law in their contracts in terms of the definition of a NORC, the density and what makes a NORC, but they are not following the state law about the match. So that 25% state match is in state law. And that was actually changed several years ago. It was 50% and brought back down to 25. So it could have just gotten lost in that process, but that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And we'll make sure we follow up with them on that with regards to the RFP. Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. Appreciate it. I'd like to next call up Sharon Brown and Janine Cahill Jackson. Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm the only one?
You're the only one, but you are still limited to the 2 minutes. You can begin whenever you're ready, and we'll start the clock.
My name is Sharon Brown, and I'm going to be running for public office. I'm going to have a rally on June 21st, 2024 on the steps of City Hall. This is the aging situation here.
Aging committee, correct.
Aging committee. So you are Crystal Hudson. You're
correct.
In charge of
I'm the chair of the committee.
Yes. Okay, so there was someone here who spoke about people that are aging, loneliness, and things like that. In order to make sure people aren't forced to be around other people who don't have the same moral values, biblical values, we don't want to do that to elderly people. If people are of a certain faith and they want to bring people in to help them with their Judaism or Christianity, they can bring people in to see them and help them, but they can't force people to.
So apologies, but the topic of today's hearing is protecting, preserving, and supporting naturally occurring retirement communities in New York City. We're also collecting comments and testimony pertaining to the resolution that we're looking to hear. So if your comments are not germane to either of those topics, I do have to ask you to end your testimony.
Okay, so the fact that you want to make sure you maintain these communities, I'm telling you the problems in those communities, the reason why the funding is not going to be proper and there's always going to be interruptions with the way people are funding these places is because of the fact that they're not meeting the needs of the aging population. So these places are going to go away because they're not meeting what people need. This includes the nursing homes, the different places that the aged are at. They're not meeting their needs.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, on Zoom, I'd like to call Jeannie Doherty and Catherine Riley. Oh, sorry. In person, Jeannie Doherty and Catherine Riley. Okay.
And then if there's anyone else in the room who wants to testify, they need to fill out an appearance card.
Is there anyone else in the room that would like to testify? And if so, you'd have to fill out an appearance card.
Can I say just one more thing about Scree?
You have to fill out the card. I'm happy to hear your sentence after the hearing, but just for formality purposes. I understand, but you already gave your testimony, and we have to do everything according to the rules. Okay, now turning to Zoom, Katie Bardinaro, Barbara Collins, and Andrietta Sims. So we'll start with Katie.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
If you turn on my Zoom, my Zoom is on too. If you want to, my
Okay.
camera's on.
I think you have the ability to turn on your camera.
It says you've stopped it.
Yeah, it's
so I
on. It's
can't
on.
turn it on.
You would have to turn it on. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I see that. Okay. Well, I can't seem to do that. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you anyway. Thank you to Committee Chair Hudson for holding this hearing, and thank you to Councilmember Brewer for sponsoring the Reso 232. Thank you to the now 15 members who are co-sponsors up to date. Some 4 have added today, I think. My name is Katie Bordonaro, and I serve as the corresponding secretary of the Mitchell-Lama Residents Coalition, MLRC, a grassroots, all-volunteer organization working since 1972 to represent the interests and needs of Mitchell-Lama renters, Mitchell-Lama cooperators, and residents living in former Mitchell-Lama developments, like IPM Independence Plaza, which testified earlier. The MLRC has long advocated for changes in the Screech-Ree program to allow it to keep up with inflation and expand the number of beneficiaries. These modifications will keep more New Yorkers in their homes for a longer period of time. There are several pieces of legislation before the New York State Legislature today to enhance Scree and Dree, and the Mitchell-Lama community is very grateful that the City Council is sending a strong message to Albany to make an automatic annual increase in the income cap for eligibility. This increase would equal any increase in the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. In 2014, the cap was set at $50,000, 10 years ago. If the cap had been raised by the CPI every year since then, it might be as high as $70,000 a day, just to keep up with the extraordinary inflation we've seen recently. This would mean that our most vulnerable residents would be able to stay in their homes. Passing this resolution, as you know, tells the state legislature that the city is ready to approve the funds needed to strengthen Scree and Dree. Thank you for making the future of Scree and Dree a priority.
Thank you so much for your testimony. I'd like to call Andrietta Sims.
Your time is starting.
Hello. I can't tell if I'm on.
We can hear you. Can you hear us, Andrietta? Can you hear me?
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Your time is starting.
You can begin your testimony, Andrietta, if you can hear me.
Okay, I'm now unmuted.
Yes.
Okay.
You can begin your testimony.
Okay, thank you. So I feel like I'm going to be redundant because so many other folks have said what I want to say. So thank you for holding this hearing. Thank you, Councilmember Brewer, for sponsoring this bill. So we are all aware that rent is the biggest expense for New York City residents. I'm a retiree living on a fixed income. I've lived in my building for over 50 years, and seniors such as myself living off of a fixed income have limited financial resources, and rent increases have taken up a larger proportion of my income, leaving less money available for necessities such as food, healthcare, and transportation. Additionally, rent increases also make it difficult for people like myself, someone depending on a fixed income, to maintain stable housing. And this is why having programs such as Scree are vital. However, the current threshold limit of $50,000 has prevented me from accessing Scree as a resource, as I am one of the people that Councilmember Brewer mentioned in her opening comment that makes a few dollars over that threshold. In order for Scree to remain sustainable long-term and to be relevant and effective, income thresholds must reflect changes in the cost of living, allowing more seniors such as myself to qualify for rent protection. And I urge all council members to support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Is there anyone else on Zoom that would like to testify? If so, you can use the raise hand function. Okay, seeing no hands raised at this time, I would like to adjourn. 1 second. Okay, there's somebody with a phone number who's raised their hand. Phone number ending in 4036. If you're logged in with a phone number ending in 4036, please state your name.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, is that Barbara Collins?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, it is. Thank you very much for calling on me, and thank you so very much for having this hearing for both the state, the assembly, and the city council. Thank you very much, city council people. You are the very best, and we do appreciate this help. My name is Barbara Collins, of course, and I live in Queens, in Woodside at the Big Six Towers, and am a senior citizen and native New Yorker, and so I've been here a long time. And in addition to all of the issues that have been raised by the current bills and that have been presented, that I do support, and I'm grateful for the people who are living in rent-stabilized, free market rent housing. However, we have a community of people who live in Mitchell-Lama development that have been there over 50 years or more that don't get into, or that are not eligible for SCREED, believe it or not, and their income is much lower. And that's simply because not only do they count their annual income, but your monthly also is included in what makes you eligible or ineligible. So 1/3 of your income must be less than your monthly maintenance or rent. In a Mitchell-Lama development, the maintenance and the rent is much lower than fair market. And those same tenants moved into Mitchell-Lama development some 50 years ago when their income may have been between $6,000 to $10,000 a year. Over the years, the cost of moving into a Mitchell-Lama development has now increased. All of the incomes coming in to $65,000 to $70,000 to even $100,000 a year. This makes their income possibly more than those who've been there 50 years. They get to be turned down for as little as 23 cents or $10 for a month for not being able to qualify for SCREED simply because their income is lower and their maintenance is lower or their rent is lower. I ask that you consider, all of you considering, including the cost of the cost of Medicare charges, which is around $160 a month, that is required of all persons, senior citizens who are receiving Social Security as a part of what should be deducted from their monthly income. It does not seem fair if you start at a lower amount not to be able to get up as high as the current amount is required. That is, 50 years ago, I moved into a Mitchell-Lama development, and I think my income was about $65,000. Over the years, to get into a Mitchell-Lama development today, did I say 65,000? I meant 6,500. Today, would cost you can get in for an income of maybe $75,000 or more. My income over the years has increased, and then decreased after I retired. This means that my income is lower anyway, and lower than anybody's, $75,000, but even lower than what it was of $50,000 before.
Thank you so much.
Please reconsider and include the cost of Medicare that takes out of the individual's monthly income. In addition, that HPD should be required to say there is a limit, that if you are less than $1 over, that should not keep you from getting from getting SCREE, which is going to increase your maintenance for about $200 because of a 21% increase over a 10% increase, and et cetera.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Does not seem to be fair. Okay.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Last call for testimony. Is there anyone in person or on Zoom that would like to testify? On Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. In person, you can fill out an appearance form. No hands and no new appearance forms. I would like to just thank everybody for their testimonies. We heard a lot of compelling stories today about why we should expand the eligibility requirements for SCREE with pertaining specifically to the Consumer Price Index, and also expansion of our naturally occurring retirement communities, and adequate funding for them as well. So thank you again to everybody who testified, including the commissioner and deputy commissioner. With that, I would like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you.